The voters' verdict is in.
We won so fast I wasn't even ready for the speech.
Wow, how about those numbers, Kansas?
But what did you tell us?
Amendments 4 and 5 have been soundly defeated.
This is about saving America.
This is as overwhelming a moment as I've ever felt in my life.
And I just want to say, let's go win this thing together.
We pick apart the surprises and the biggest winners and losers of primary election day in both states. And more importantly, we ask, what happens now?
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Bob and Marlise Gorley, the Francis Family Foundation through the discretionary fund of David and Janice Francis, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. Glad to have you with us for this post-election edition of Week in Review. The campaign commercials have finally stopped. The ballots have been counted. Now comes the interesting part, figuring out what it all means and what happens next. But first, a brief pre-flight announcement. We were told there wasn't going to be a Week in Review this week because our summer membership drive is now underway. And as you know, it's our viewers' financial help that keeps this program on the air. So we struck a deal. Rather than removing the show entirely for fundraising, you get the full election analysis you expect, and Kansas City PBS gets one short intermission during the show to ask for your support. Is that fair enough? Now to help make sense of the winners, the losers, the surprises and the consequences, from the Kansas City Star government elections and democracy reporter Kason Bayless, KCUR's chief political analyst Brian Ellison, fresh from our on-the-ballot election special, Dr. Abigail Vector, political scientist at William Jewell College, and from the helm of your Johnson County Post, Kyle Palmer. Complete this sentence. The biggest surprise, Kason, on election night was blank.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me was just the resounding defeat of Amendment 4 and Amendment 5 in Missouri. I mean, I think there was some expectation that they face an uphill battle, but to lose every county in Missouri and not even surpass 20% of the statewide vote, I think was pretty stunning.
So not one county in the entire state of Missouri voted for either of those in a majority?
No, it lost every county and the independent city of St. Louis.
Lost Republicans, lost Democrats, lost urban, lost rural. I mean, I think I've said on this program that there's nothing that all 8 congressional districts in this state could possibly agree on, so nothing could ever pass under Amendment 4. But I was wrong. They all agreed that Amendment 4 should not pass.
Interestingly on that one, by the way, they started an analysis, a breakdown of all of these. And it says in Shannon County, which is in the south part of Missouri, in the Ozarks, where President Trump won 84% of the vote in the last election, 83% of voters rejected Amendment 4, 92% voted against it.
Yeah, this was really a resounding defeat for Amendment 4 and Amendment 5. And these are voters, you know, who are politically engaged, politically knowledgeable. Primary voters are somewhat different than general election voters. And across the board, no matter who these voters were, they all really gave us a clear answer on how they felt about 4 and 5.
Could this have been different? I know when we looked at these issues in our on-the-ballot special, Brian, you said, for instance, on the income tax vote, you know, if they added more information about, you know, what sales taxes might go up, they would actually have less of a vote for this. Could they have done something differently, though, that would have made a difference?
I mean, I do think that this had a number of problems from the start, and part of it was the uncertainty about what taxes might increase. On the other hand, as I said on that show, I would stick with, I don't know what they could have said that would cause people to think differently about the fears of removing that significant portion of the state's general revenue budget all at the same time. I think folks were just not convinced that there was a good alternative.
Now, we were told, for instance, Kason, it didn't actually require a vote of the people to eliminate the income tax itself. It was because they wanted to increase other taxes, which would have been unconstitutional without this measure passing. So is there going to be another effort now in some other way to still do this without perhaps bypassing voters?
I think there will certainly be a push to cut taxes. I mean, this is something that Governor Kehoe ran on when he ran for governor in 2024. I do wonder if the political will to do it all at once, to do sort of this big swing on the income tax is still there. I think what we'll see over the next 2 years is maybe a way at chipping away at taxes. But I do wonder if there is going to be another big swing at this, because, I mean, it was such a resounding defeat.
How about a big swing on Amendment 4, which was really about requiring that all constitutional amendments get a majority in every single one of the congressional districts? You know, you look at other states like Colorado, they require 55% support to pass amendments. Florida, 60%. New Hampshire, 66%. So you could do this differently.
Absolutely. And those are all a little bit more likely palatable to voters. But as we've been talking about with Amendment 5, pretty resounding rejection of Amendment 4. So I think supporters of Amendment 4 are going to need to take a step back, really think if there's any sort of appetite for this among residents before proposing a different solution.
Kyle Palmer, the biggest surprise for you on election night was blank.
Well, we could continue the amendment trend over in Kansas, too. The constitutional amendment to change how Kansas Supreme Court justices are selected went down pretty heartily, but we've seen that play out before in Kansas. 4 years ago with the Value Them Both Amendment, it was almost the same exact scenario. Wash, rinse, repeat. Republicans put the issue on a low turnout August primary ballot, and still voters reject it. I'll go another direction as well. In Johnson County particularly, the, I think, pretty comfortable victory by Cindy Holscher in the Democratic gubernatorial primary, taking out 2 other Johnson Countyans to carry her party's banner forward into November against Ty Masterson, the Republican who won on the Republican side. I think you saw in the days before the election that she had the momentum, but still to come out nearly 10 percentage points ahead of Corson, who had the backing of Laura Kelly, who had a 2-to-1 fundraising margin, I think was still pretty surprising.
What's her big liability now as she goes into this general election?
Well, she ran, and she has found some anti-establishment energy, both in Johnson County and beyond in Kansas. Now, will that translate to being successful statewide? Laura Kelly was elected twice, running, kind of leaning into how boring she was and how she was kind of played up her grandmother aspect, and that she studiously stayed out of national issues. And I don't think Cindy Holscher has touched upon national issues, but she seems to be much more willing to go toe-to-toe with someone like Masterson on culture war issues like transgender bathrooms and DEI. But he also has his own liabilities with being the head of the Senate and having no relief for property taxes over the last 4 years, his vote for data center incentives. So they're both going to have cases to make. Can she break out of the Johnson County bubble and appeal to people that Laura Kelly appealed to?
Here, by the way, are the results. And this is what they said on election night, including what Ty Masterson said, which he wants to be the next Donald Trump for Kansas.
I think he wakes up every day trying to put more money in your pocket and make us a safer nation. And, you know, he's out there, he wants investment in America. He wants things made in America. It's one thing we hit it off on. I want that investment in Kansas. I want things made in Kansas. I want opportunities for all our children, because that's what keeps them here.
I knew Ty Masterson would likely lead the Republicans and get the nomination. It's okay to say, I heard somebody say yuck. I mean, And after 10 years in the House and Senate, I knew what would happen if he did. Because Ty Masterson as governor would drag us back into the Brownback years. And even further. It would be politics as usual with a side of MAGA extremism.
That's what surprised me the most about these elections, Nick, is not so much a surprise, but the cognitive dissonance between these seismic rejections of the ballot proposals, but the support for the very conservatives who engineered those proposals. On the Kansas side, Ty Masterson overwhelmingly winning his primary, and on the Missouri side, folks like Rick Bratton and John Patterson winning their elections easily in legislative races or in the congressional race. There is a cognitive dissonance that I think voters in Missouri and Kansas sort of have to reconcile, or at least political pundits have to try to keep talking about and figure out.
You mentioned the Kansas constitutional amendment that would directly elect justices. That failed with 62% of the vote. We debated that issue with Chris Kobach, the Kansas Attorney General. This is, by the way, what he said during that debate about what would happen now. Okay. If your side loses in August, will you accept that Kansans have spoken or immediately begin looking for another way to change the system?
No, I think Kansas will have spoken. I think this is it. I mean, this is the chance Kansans have to return to an elected Supreme Court like we had for a century.
Is this it then?
In a word, probably not. When we saw Value Them Both in 2022, the abortion amendment, that was a sound rejection of that measure, but we have seen the Republican-led legislature over the last 4 years tinker with abortion restrictions, some of them which have now been permanently struck by a Johnson County judge, I might say. So could we expect some of the same things? Could they change or restructure how the nominating commission is made? Could they somehow raise or change the retention standards for re-electing judges on these retention ballots? They could go down that road and they could try to tinker with the process. I don't think it's over. I can't imagine that they wouldn't try to kind of accept the will of the people, as they might say, and move on, because it didn't happen in 2022.
There's lots of other ways of trying to choose Supreme Court justices, including the federal model, where, in this case, the governor would be picking the Supreme Court judge. and then the Senate will have to confirm it.
Of course. Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that there's going to be another way to sort of tweak this. I think pointing to value them both in 2022 is a really good discrepancy to sort of point to right now.
What was your biggest surprise on election night, Abigail?
Oh, I don't know if it was necessarily a surprise. Adam Hamilton performed as we really thought he would towards the end of this campaign, but it could lead to a surprising November. He certainly has an uphill battle, but to see a Senate race in Kansas move from solid Republican to likely Republican, that's a shift. I don't think it's a slam dunk by any means for Adam Hamilton. Kansas hasn't sent a Democrat to the Senate in nearly 100 years. But it could lead to a much more interesting race than maybe we would have had with a different candidate and a lot more national attention.
Here, by the way, are the results on the screen in that Democratic primary for U.S. Senate in Kansas, where Adam Hamilton now takes on incumbent Republican Senator Roger Marshall.
We don't need more yes men in Washington. We need a senator who will speak up for their people, one who listens, tells the truth, who has one guiding principle, and that is what is best for the people of Kansas. Not what does the president want or my party want, but what is best for the people of Kansas.
The mainstream Democrats in Washington today are big government socialists. They've never seen a spending program that they haven't liked. I'm going to be focused truly on the cost of living, making sure that your families are safe and secure.
The last time we did this program, you said you weren't sure that he was going to be successful in that fall election with Roger Marshall. Have you changed your mind now, Brian?
I don't think I have changed my mind. I do think we did see the shifting in the Cook Political Report and others who do this sort of analysis from solid Republican to leans Republican or likes Republican, likely Republican. I don't think he has any less of an uphill battle than he did before, but I think we have sort of seen the debate crystallize. Roger Marshall talking there about affordability, I think he would like very much, for example, for President Trump to talk more about affordability. And I think Roger Marshall is now more subject than he was before to national headwinds and national trends. And if they continue to trend against Republicans, that does give Adam Hamilton a little more of a chance than he had before, which is bolstered, I should add, by his willingness to now shift back to what his first intentions were, which was to run as an independent. I think you're going to hear him sounding very nonpartisan themes the next 3 months as he tries to say to people who voted for Donald Trump, people who voted for Roger Marshall, you're safe with me.
I did notice that actually Adam Hamilton, though he did incredibly well, of course, in that election, but he didn't win Sedgwick County, where Wichita is. He didn't win Wyandotte County, and he didn't win Shawnee County, where Topeka is.
Yeah, this is something he's going to have to tap into. I mean, I think that Adam Hamilton does give Democrats probably their best chance against Roger Marshall. It'll be an uphill battle. When he talks about his congregation, he usually talks about it being pretty 50-50 split in terms of Republicans and Democrats. That's something he's really going to have to tap into, is that ability to message to both sides of the aisle in this race.
We're going to track election night's biggest winners and losers and take a look at what happens next in Kansas and Missouri. But first, remember that deal I mentioned at the top of the program? You get this edition of Week in Review during our summer membership drive. Kansas City PBS gets a few minutes to remind you why your support matters. It's your generosity that keeps this program on the air, along with everything from children's programming, Nova, Frontline, and epic scale documentaries from Ken Burns. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. I am Steph Shannon, Director of Major Giving at Kansas City PBS, and I am thrilled to have our guest with us, Tracy DeMaria,
great to be
Brilliant
here.
Nonprofit
Thank
Solutions.
You.
Hello, Tracy.
Thank you.
So I understand this might be your favorite show?
This is my favorite show. We were just talking. This is my favorite show. I love PBS. You can tell by the accent. I love PBS. The Week in Review for me and for the family is incredibly special. We watch it on a Friday. So we kind of have this thing that you watch it on a Friday. And if we don't watch it on a Friday, we actually record it. And then the rule is that we have to watch it by Sunday.
I love that.
And my in-laws are the same. They watch it. So we have this thing to talk about. We talk about all the topics that come up on Week in Review. So yeah.
Okay, so it's a whole family affair at Tracy's household. So keep in mind, you can record it like they do and watch it by Sunday. I love this rule. Or you can watch it on the PBS app. So keep that in mind. And what we're doing here today is that we're eliciting support for local journalism. We want you to help us keep shows like this on the air. And we are 100% community funded. So we really, really want your support. 888-203-1747 or go to the website kansascitypbs.org. And we're making it completely easy, so you can also get out your phone and use that QR code. But if you donate today, we will talk about some special gifts for you. But I have another question for Tracy really quick. So what is it about this local journalism show that you find so important for yourselves and for our whole community?
Yeah. There is something about knowing the richness that is going on here in Kansas City, because we're this two-state, we cover the two states, and we really do need to be aware and what is happening here locally. So Week in Review gives me that. It gives me journalists from different backgrounds, from the television, from newspaper, from radio.
Right.
They're bringing in different views, and they don't always agree, and we know that because you can see that, but it's done incredibly respectfully. And I want...
Isn't that a breath of fresh air?
Huge.
Right?
And I want to hear from people that have that different view.
I agree. So what's so lovely at the end of one of the shows is they say, well, what didn't we cover today?
I know, I love that.
I love how different everybody's thoughts are on that. It's not always what Nick has picked.
No.
A lot of times it's something that reminds us how important it is.
Yeah.
So Tracy, as you can tell, she's got an accent. So one of the things she does with her mug is she has British tea in the morning.
I need British tea.
We want you to have British tea or coffee or whatever you'd like to drink. So the gift for supporting the show, supporting our station, is a $6 ongoing monthly gift. You get this great mug, a Week in Review mug, or for just a one-time $72 gift, this mug is yours. And this is just a thank you gift for becoming a member at this level. Another gift that we have for you is a really cool baseball cap.
Love the cap.
Week in Review baseball cap.
Yeah.
Imagine yourself going to the grocery store and donning this cap, showing your support publicly of this program, and you'll find other like-minded people wearing this cap too. $8, an ongoing monthly gift, or a one-time gift of $96. And how do you get this gift? By supporting us today, 888-203-1747. You can also go to our website. You can do that from your computer, from your tablet, from your phone, kansascitypbs.org. We try to make it simple. And just reminding you, this is a community show, community local journalism, and you, the community, are our only supporters of Kansas City PBS. So you're the ones keeping this on the air. And why is it important? Why do you think it's important to have a show like this stay on the air?
Yeah, and to carry on what we were just saying about the differing views, and it's also the people that we've got around the table come from different backgrounds.
Right.
You've got some young journalists there that are giving their opinion.
Right.
We've then got the seasoned people like Eric and Dave and Chris.
Right.
So you've got a lot of different views coming in from different people with different backgrounds, from different stations and different papers. I mean, where else will you get that for that half an hour every week that you need to summarize what's been going on for that week?
That's so true. And so keeping that in mind, some of the topics that come up, you can deep dive later on once it's come up for you. But I love the video packages that come along with it.
Yeah.
I love how, Nick really curates such a great group of people and then facilitates it so beautifully. I mean, Nick is such a treasure. And please call and support Nick, 888-203-1747, or go to kansascitypbs.org for your support of Nick and his show, Week in Review. He works so hard on it. This is a weekly show, and a lot happens in the Kansas City Metro on both sides of the state line each week.
And Nick makes sure that he's aware of all the stories because he brings in those questions.
Exactly.
No, it's a great half hour spent every week.
It's a great half hour.
You can't get that anywhere else.
And Nick has those relationships in Kansas City.
And he's calm.
He is calm.
He's calm.
And like he says on his show, keep calm and carry on.
Calm.
And that's such a good theme. So keep calm and carry on, but also pick up the phone, please, 888-203-1747, kansascitypbs.org. Tracy and her family love to watch the show. I know that a lot of people watch the PBS NewsHour every day, and then also on Fridays watch Week in Review. And this is a great way to support the station. Keep all the shows that you love, whether it's journalist-based or arts-based or kids shows. We're about lifelong education. So call us, 888-203-1747. We're so glad that you were here. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Steph and Tracy, thank you. And thank you for thinking enough of us to support our work. Complete this sentence, Kason. The biggest winner on Election Day was blank.
I think it was direct democracy in Missouri. I think Missouri voters pretty soundly protected their right to petition their own government, and I think that the results were, like I said, they couldn't muster 20% yes votes in favor of it.
How about the turnout overall? Was there a bump?
There was. I don't have the final numbers in front of me, but I think the predictions were that it was going to be not a historic turnout, but a historic over the last 20 years turnout.
Did you notice that in Johnson County, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, it went up over 2024, for instance. I think it was about 37% after unofficial votes on Tuesday night. It's not going to come close to 2022 again with the value of them both amendment on the ballot that year. That was historic. I think somewhere north of 55% turnout for a primary election, but still, I think better than 2016, 18, 20, or 24. So still pretty healthy, robust turnout.
Biggest winner for you, Abigail Vector?
I might say Donald Trump was a big winner here in Kansas and Missouri. His endorsements sailed through. Ty Masterson on the Kansas side will be the Republican nominee for governor. We have Alford in District 4 in Missouri and Bratton in District 5 in Missouri. And Donald Trump continues his near perfect streak of getting involved in these primary elections and his endorsements going on to win the nomination.
Ryan, your biggest winner?
I think if Kyle doesn't mind my venturing onto the Kansas side of the state line, I think Cindy Holscher emerges as a big winner to overcome the endorsement of your own party's governor for your opponent. And to do so by more than 10 percentage points. Cindy Holscher had to carve her own lane even after the governor doubled down on the endorsement of Ethan Corson. And she pulled off a commanding victory that gives her a clear message going into this race against Ty Masterson.
Kyle?
I think the biggest winner, literally and symbolically, Congresswoman Sharice Davids. Her victory margin, I think, was one of the largest on the night. She won 80.
She had her first primary, didn't she?
And this was her first primary challenge after 4 terms in Congress. She won, I think, 83 to 17% after unofficial total, so it was a de facto unopposed. But her opponent, Sarah Prue, ran intentionally to the left of her, called for abolishing ICE, called for Medicare for all, called for a $15 hour minimum wage. And that message never really struck or resonated. There was never any sort of sweating by Sharice Davids. So when you see, Democratic Socialists align victories in other parts of the U.S., including in Michigan on Tuesday night, Sharice Davids was able to hold serve by a 5-to-1 margin in Johnson County.
I also put down the biggest winner as being a political reporter's case, because I've never seen an election where it was so decided so early on. Sure. All of the major races were so decisive, weren't they? There were no nail-biters at all.
No, I was at a watch party along Truce Avenue. It was for the opponents of Amendments 4 and 5, and I think they called it around 8 o'clock at night. I had a very early night.
I can't believe none of you mentioned, by the way, as the biggest winner as Stacey Lake. She could be the next permanent replacement for ousted Jackson County Executive Frank White, getting more of the vote than her 2 closest rivals combined. She says she's going to be different than any other executive in history. What does that mean, Brian?
I mean, I think a number of us were surprised, certainly by the margin of victory. What it said something about name familiarity. Stacey Lake appeared on the ballot previously. She came very close to upsetting Frank White in an earlier primary election. But I think it also did say something about the policies she advocated. She came out against data centers, at least tax incentives for data centers. She took a very strong line on the tax assessment issue and on the need to not only support refunds for people's overpayments, but to cut ties with the technology company that might have been responsible for some of those overpayments. I think folks heard a very clear message from her, and she did stand out in other ways against a field of all men, mostly white, and a lot of people who'd been in county government for a long time, whereas she represented something genuinely different.
She does have a Republican opponent in the fall, a combat veteran by the name of Alan Rolfing, but traditionally, Republicans haven't fared very well in those county races.
We have generally assumed that the winner of the Democratic primary for Jackson County Executive is going to win, but we shouldn't make assumptions.
I am going to slide over to Kansas, because in Johnson County, with all of those complaints we've heard recently about everything from whether it be data centers, property taxes, you name it, Mike Kelly did actually rather well in his race for Johnson County chair.
Yeah, 3-person race. He was the top vote getter by far, 57%. His 2 more conservative challengers combined had about 43%. You figure if that consolidates around Karen Snurkovich, who came in second. For the general election, he would still have a pretty safe path to re-election. I mean, Mike Kelly has kind of become this avatar for a new kind of changing demographically Johnson County, both for his supporters and his detractors. That Johnson County is generally younger, a little bit more left-leaning, and his policies about kind of tolerating higher taxes. He doesn't raise taxes, but he hasn't cut them nearly as much as his opponents want. Tolerating higher taxes in order to get the services that you want, to fund things like public safety and EMS. There's a real contrast with Snurkovich, who's going to be there in in the general election because she's calling for pretty steep property tax cuts back to the revenue neutral rate, which would require a lot of steeper budget cuts, which she also is open to. And so that choice will be pretty apparent for Johnson County voters.
Complete this sentence, Kaysen. The biggest loser on Election Day was blank.
I'm going to go back to Missouri again. I think the biggest loser on Tuesday night was Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe, and including both states. I do think Republican lawmakers in both states suffered pretty resounding losses when it comes to those constitutional amendments.
And the income tax was his main priority. He didn't get that. It fails. But he wasn't around to answer any questions because he was off to Panama on a trade mission. He's out of the country, right?
Yes. I think he left the next day.
Okay.
I think he stuck around for election night and then left the day after.
Does this make him politically vulnerable now, do you think?
I think it certainly wounds him. I think when we think of Governor Kehoe, we have to look back to 2024 when he was in his Republican primary. He faced two challengers to his right flank, received 39% of the vote. Ever since that election, he's sort of taken these big swings on Missouri's congressional map under pressure from Donald Trump, the income tax, and then now this initiative petition proposal. It'll be interesting to see over the next 2 years whether we see a more scaled-back Governor Kehoe or he continues to sort of take these big, high-profile, pretty partisan decisions.
With some of the gloating from Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas this week, who is also feeling good because all of the Kansas City questions passed, there was some sort of sense that perhaps he may be interested in running for statewide office in 2028 when Governor Mike Kehoe is back on the ballot as a result of this election.
He has pretty steadfastly said he's not going to do that, but of course a lot can change over the coming months. I mean, I think Governor Kehoe is weakened by what happened, but I think most of that increased weakness happens with his own party. He commandeered a lot of the energy over the last legislative session to this income tax reduction idea. And a lot of people put their necks out on the line. Some of them might have even lost their primaries in part because of that. I don't think he necessarily draws serious challengers 2 years from now for governor, but I think it does cost him in what he's able to put on the table as priorities going forward.
Biggest loser, Abigail?
Oh my goodness, I was going to say Mike Kehoe as well, but really those supporters of Amendment 4 and 5 in Missouri, if we're staying on the Missouri side, as we've already mentioned in this conversation, resounding rejection, and you're going home with your tail between your legs a little bit here.
But Mike Kehoe did say, well, that was because of special interests. That was the best we got as an explanation for that. The biggest loser for you on election night was who, Kyle?
Well, kind of riffing off Brian's take on mentioning Quinton Lucas and mayors, cautionary tale in Kansas about popular mayors trying to move up to the statewide level. Kurt Skoog, mayor of Overland Park, just a year ago, 9 months in fact, won re-election as Overland Park mayor with 70% of the vote, flying high, and then decided to enter the Democratic gubernatorial contest literally hours before the filing deadline in June, and kind of led to some scratched heads and some raised eyebrows about what the motivation was. He explicitly said he didn't think Corson or Holscher were electable, and that he was coming in kind of on a message of electability and ended up garnering 13% of the vote in his own party's primary. I don't think it hurts him long-term, at least politically in Overland Park.
But what about if Cindy Holscher becomes governor?
That's what I was going to say.
Do you think now that this is an opportunity for some vengeance here? Overland Park may not get much of an ear from the governor's mansion.
Well, relationally, it might hurt, right? Because he came in at the last minute, and these were two popular Democrats from his own county, and he, again, made his message based on the fact that he didn't think they could win.
Brian, your biggest loser on election day was blank?
Well, I don't think it's fair that Kaysen gets to go first every time, because I agree, Mike Kehoe was the big loser. But I would expand it more broadly to the Republican leadership of Missouri that was willing to fall in line, but now I think might be less willing to do so going forward.
And we could also say data centers were the biggest loser. Cindy Holscher wants the statewide moratorium. She's the most fierce against those in Kansas. We had Stacey Lake, who doesn't want to spend one dime as a Jackson County executive if she's elected to be spent on data centers too.
Yeah, and I will be interested to see how Ty Masterson threads that needle, because he voted for the incentives for the data centers. They are extremely unpopular in rural Republican areas, even in Johnson County, around Gardner and DeSoto and Edgerton. And so how he squares that circle and explains that vote, because you can imagine Cindy Holscher going after that.
And on that, we will say, our election week has been reviewed, courtesy of William Jewell, political scientist, Dr. Abigail Vector, and the stars Kaysen Bayless. From the Johnson County Post, Kyle Palmer, and KCUR's Brian Ellison. And I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here during the fundraising week here at Kansas City PBS. Be well, keep calm, and carry on.